right, it's 1:30, so we're going to start. And while people file in, I'm going to welcome you to the Literary Journal panel, the Vanguard. Vanguard, as you might know, is a forward military movement. And the people I'm sitting next to are extremely lethal killers. That's why, if you can't see my legs, they're shaking. But there is a reason for them to be aggressive, to be slightly militaristic, because as any of you know who's lived in a neighborhood where a bookstore is closed down, or one of your favorite authors was dropped by a mainstream publisher, something is changing in book publishing. Big publishers are taking fewer risks with first-time writers, and great little bookstores are having trouble staying open as gas gets more expensive, as Amazon takes over more of the market. It's hard to find a sense of community, and if there's anything that a literary journal can do is it creates a community. It's a community of like-minded readers and people who sign on to see what's next, and that's what literary journals can do and can do very well, because with a book you only have one name on that book unless it's an anthology. So a publisher has to invent someone from scratch, but a literary journal is kind of a Trojan horse. If you have a name like Jonathan Lethem or Rick Moody or Yeon Lee on the back of your journal, you can have another name which means nothing to anybody. And that's a really great thing, because you can get people to read new writers if they agree that you have good taste. And the people that I'm up here with today have excellent taste. And they are all at the very beginning, in some ways, of creating their sense of taste, because their journals are as old as 2 issues and 13. My name is John Freeman. I'm the editor of Granta Magazine, and we have 115 issues. And I'm not saying that as a bragging thing, but the magazine I work for was in the very same boat as these journals that I'm up here to discuss today. Granta was launched in 1979 after it had been the literary magazine of Cambridge University. It fell out of print, and 2 Americans on Fulbrights took it back and reinvented it. And this is in 1979, so there was no Amazon.com UK. There was no free newspapers from around the world, so literature didn't travel quite as fast and in the same various ways that it did. So American writers weren't being published in London, and the editors felt like that the British writers had become overly wedded to realism. They had become staid and tired, and so they took this venerable British institution and relaunched it, and the first issue that they did was called New American Writing, and it featured work by Paul Auster and Susan Sontag and Stanley Elkin and William Gass and Donald Barthelme. Anyway, they would have probably gone out of business if that had been their own thing, that just to publish American writers, but they quickly expanded and added new genres like memoir and travel and started publishing great writers from around the world. And what they were responding to was a need, in some ways, to find an international literary magazine, a magazine which looked at the world and looked at narrative and storytelling. So what I'm going to talk to the editors I'm up here with today is, what need are they responding to? What is their Vanguard trying to what need are they trying to fill? So I'm going to introduce a panel now. We're going to talk for about 45 minutes, and then we're going to take questions for 10. At the far left is Bruce Bauman. He's the author of the novel And the Word Was. His novel, In Progress, Broken Sleep, to be finished this summer, he promises, he swears to God. His publisher, somewhere in the audience, I guess, will be published by other press as well in 2012. He's published dozens of short stories, reviews, and essays, and he has been a senior editor of the journal Black Clock since its inception. He's also been an instructor at Cal Arts MFA program since 2003. To his immediate right is Laurie Ochoa. She's the co-editor of the Los Angeles Literary and Narrative Journalism Quarterly, Slake. Previously, she was the editor of the LA Weekly, which consistently won more national journalism awards under her tenure than any other alternative newspaper in the U.S. And you're not there? Why?
That's Laurie Ochoa. Just
Laurie?
Laurie Ochoa.
Ochoa.
They did print it wrong, but
Yeah. Just that's for you guys, Laurie Ochoa. She's my partner. I got to step in here.
So I just mispronounced. Is it Laurie?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. This is how it was printed.
I know.
I'm just reading.
She's right,
There's a teleprompter behind you. Anyway, other things I know about her in a superficial way. She has worked at the Los Angeles Times. She's edited Gourmet. She lives in Pasadena, California, and here comes the sweet part, with her husband, Jonathan Gold, and their 2 children, 1 cat and a snake. Talk about negative capability, snake and cat.
and the snake just passed away.
see how else I can fuck this up. Brigid Hughes, to my immediate right, spent 10 years at the Paris Review, where she worked as the executive editor under George Plimpton. After his death, she succeeded him, and then she decided there was a need for a new magazine dedicated to fiction, and so started A Public Space, a quarterly literary journal that pursues the power of fiction and wider worldviews. The magazine is based in Brooklyn, where she also curates a fiction and film series with the Brooklyn Academy of Music. Finally, on the far right, Joe Donnelly is a Los Angeles writer, editor, and former deputy editor of the Los Angeles Weekly. He has also been the arts editor of the New Times Los Angeles, and before that, the editor of the seminal pop culture magazine Bikini. He was also the founding editor of the groundbreaking art-damaged snowboarding magazine Stick.
Who wrote this stuff?
I didn't. I was just, I just read the shit, you know.
Read it well.
My name is also Laurie Ochoa.
Laurie's doppelganger has worked as a reporter at the New York Daily News, the LA Times, the Washington Post, and he is currently the publisher and co-editor of the new LA Quarterly Slake. So why don't we start with Slake? There are 2 issues in. Why did you guys launch? What did you feel like you needed to do, and what are you particularly proud of in the first 2 issues?
Well, the first thing was we had been at the LA Weekly and had been very frustrated by squeezing the budgets and all of that. And we just saw that there's a definite need for a different kind of way of covering the city. And our favorite things to do in the weekly were always the long-form narrative journalism. So that's one of the first things we wanted to do, is to have a home for narrative journalism. But also, we also love fiction and memoir and poetry. I never got a chance to run enough photo essays and also to make art look different. We knew that we wanted to do print. Print was really important to us. So, but we also knew that if you're going to start something in print now, because everyone we went to said, "Why don't you just do it online? You know, that it's a lot cheaper." But we also knew that to really get attached to something, you really want to hold it. And so we knew also that we didn't want something that would just be pure words on the page. We knew that if it's going to be new and it's going to be print, it's got to be beautiful. So we had, we took a lot of time in the art direction. Each issue's changed in its look. The 3rd issue we're working on is very different from the 1st and 2nd. They're both, kind of meant to keep on your bedside table. It's not just a coffee table book just to look good and never read. We want people to take the whole season that this is out and find a different story every night. It's not something to just recycle like a newspaper. And Joe doesn't even like to call it a magazine, so we're thinking about journals. And also, it's just, one of the other things that we didn't see out there are a lot of literary journals out there, they're great, but we didn't see something that was covering a city in the way that we want to cover it. So it's kind of slowing things down, bringing great writing that's not just an instant reaction to something. We're both editors, and we love working with writers and pulling their best work out of them. We love discovering new voices. We love making established writers come out with their best work and not just do the lazy, here's something, and print this and never discuss it. So we take a lot of time in the editing of this. And it's just a really great, rich mix of covering Los Angeles.
One of the things you just mentioned, print, long-form journalism, taking your time, quality work, not instant reactions. That all sounds very retro. Is there a retro aesthetic to the new Vanguard?
First of all, I just want to tell her, we were going to name this Snake, but then something happened. I got to throw a little one-liner in there. I'll be here all week. Yeah, there's something retro about it, but it's not like consciously retro. And Laurie's being very polite. The real story is, we both needed jobs, and in the new economy, we found that you have to actually spend your own money to have a job. So that's one of the reasons we did this. But we love what we do, and what we do is a little bit retro. We were sort of making a joke the other day that sometimes it seems like we're the last editors, and we really love what we do, and we love to edit. As Laurie was saying, we love to try and, part of editing is helping people, a big part of it to me is helping people realize their dreams. They come to you with a dream of a story, of expression, of communicating something, of informing people of something, of doing something that will make a difference. And when people come to you with that, and especially for what we pay, which isn't very much.
How much is it exactly?
We pay
it's $200 to $300
for a basic story,
yeah.
$300 for the big, long investigative piece.
Yeah.
It's 10 times what we pay.
Yeah.
And
It's
but
actually,
our
it's
motto-
100 times.
Our motto is, we may not pay much, but it's more than the Huffington Post.
And so what we have to offer in exchange for that is a chance to do something that might not be, you might not be able to do in more institutionalized framework, and to actually, work with our contributors to really help them realize the best of what they're trying to do. And, the retro part for me is that, reading is incredibly important. And narrative is incredibly important. Storytelling is incredibly important. That's how we are. That's what forms community, not just locally, but regionally, nationally, and internationally. And I think something really, really powerful and important is lost in the sort of just instant information bits that you get from you get mostly from the web and from the phone. This is my international symbol for the phone, and stuff like that. So I think narrative is how you breed empathy. It's how you breed. It's how you learn to experience what you might not be able to yourself, given different circumstances. So that's incredibly important to us, and I think that's the retro aspect of it.
And speaking to print, thinking of Granta, I subscribed to Granta when I was in college, and I still have some of my favorite issues. One of them being, when you're talking about, is the parent issue, they fuck you up, and I still...
Those words are on the cover.
They were, and those are things that stick with you years later. So, one of our goals was to say, we could go out there, we could spend 2 years trying to raise money for some online magazine or something, but we want something that's going to last. So it was worth it to put a lot of money on the line and our reputations and try to create something that, no matter what happens later, that we'll have this and that these will last.
Was that sort of your idea with a public space? It's beautifully printed, it looks gorgeous. It doesn't feel like something you're going to recycle, but what was sort of the deeper aesthetic reasons for launching?
I think the primary reason for launching the magazine was, this was about 5 years ago, and it was a time when a lot of the bigger magazines were deciding to stop publishing fiction, and there was sort of a smaller and smaller place in the reading world, it seemed to me, for fiction, and particularly for new writers. At the same time, there were a small group of new fiction writers that I had started reading at the Paris Review, and I thought that there was a way to publish a magazine to support and sort of nurture those new writers, and just sort of selfishly, they were people I wanted to read, and I wanted a place to keep reading them.
Yeah, I noticed you published Peter Orner in some of the early issues, and Nam Lee and Yuan Lee. In what way is a magazine sort of a vessel for your own taste that you hope other people respond to? Because I think all of us up here have favorite writers, and you just sort of publish them thinking, oh, I hope they like it.
I think I've always worked sort of in the small magazine world, so I know it's sort of an alternate universe from the publishing world at large, but it was my understanding that if you are doing something as foolish as publishing a little magazine, you have to only publish what you love, because I don't know what the point of doing it would be otherwise. So
we publish only people we hate. It's called it.
It's love-hate.
It's a love-hate relationship. But was there anyone that you discovered in launching the magazine in the first couple issues that you feel particularly proud of?
I can't choose favorites.
Well, someone, people who hadn't had a book, or maybe didn't even have an agent, and you were basically taking their work and giving them a platform.
We've made an effort to publish a new writer in every issue, and in the first issue we had a story by Tim O'Sullivan. It was his first published story, and we published his second story last year, and that's been, for me, sort of a real treat, is just to watch him and to read him as he sort of develops as a writer. And the story in issue 10 was just selected for the Pushcart Prize anthology, which is a collection sort of the best of the small presses. So that was a nice moment for him and for us.
Bruce, tell us a bit about Black Clock and why it came to be and what you guys are about.
Well, it started it was the inspiration for the head of the MFA program at Cal Arts, Jan Wagner, who went out and hired Steve Erickson, who's an acclaimed novelist. He's had 10 novels, won numerous prizes, and I hadn't known him beforehand, and he was one of my favorite writers in the world, and I luckily got a job at Cal Arts and then came to the magazine. And the basic impetus was two things: to establish a magazine on the West Coast to show that there is great writing coming from the West Coast and not everything is based in New York, but still have a national reputation. And at the same time, give a number of well-known writers. We've had a lot of MacArthur winners, National Book Award winners, and to write something that they normally would never write, just step out of the box, and Steve likes to say, give them a chance to fail. And we really love to do that with writers and to publish new writers. Now at the beginning we published more established writers. Now it's probably a 50-50 balance between famous writers and new people. And in the last couple of years we've had someone like Grace Kralanovich, who we published first, and she just was 5 under 35 National Book Award winner for her book, The Orange Eats Creeps. We've had, I think, 6 people who published their first short story will be having or have had book come out. So it's that balance to do that in that way. And like I said, we've had people who you would never normally think write about sports. We had a sports theme issue, write about sports. You never would give them that, God idea. And the same about sex. We've had theme issues on sex, which have been quite wild, and personal guilty pleasure issues. So people who are known as novelists of a certain type could do something completely different. And what you said at the beginning, to establish the community of writers. We use a number of writers fairly frequently, as well as new ones, so people get a feel of it and that they belong to this community. And Steve is quite retro and really, really, really believes in the written word and holding the page. It was hard to convince him even to let us have a website.
Yeah, I did some tallying based on your website, and you guys have published Jonathan Lethem 7 times, Rick Moody, Lynn Tillman 5 times, Brian Evanson, Joanna Scott, Jeff Nicholson. You get a sense of what kind of worldview you're calling from with that list of writers, but is there any danger that it becomes kind of a private club that you look in from the outside?
At first, we were actually accused of that. And we felt, and this is very much on Steve's mind, is the way to establish us, and what you sort of said at the beginning, was to get a readership. If we published the first 2 issues with people who have not published before, would people have bought it? Would Cal Arts continue to support it? And the answer was going to be no, I can tell you. So we went in with that mindset to get people like Lethem to publish a lot and that. And if you do look at the first 2 issues, you'll see it's almost everyone who had published numerous times. If you look at the 13 was a different, because it was like our mashup issue, but the issues before that, they're at least half the issue is people who've never published before. That's our most recent issue. So there was that danger, and but also, we looked at the past magazines, and in the past, there have been magazines that had an established stable of writers and used them, so people know what they can come to expect. They're going to get really great writing. They're going to get something really innovative, something different than they're used to. And, you know, now our mission is to at least be 50-50 each time with, if not someone who's their first or second story, certainly someone who is not have a world or national reputation. And I think I did a count of this in the last 3 issues. It's been over 35 new people with their first or second story, and that's our mission, is to keep that balance. I mean, Lethem wants to publish with us. He pretty much can if he has an idea for our theme, but then we will, you know, get new people.
Before I switch gears here, give us someone that we should all be reading.
Well, I would say of the new people,
yeah,
I'd say Grace's book, The Orange Eats Creeps. There's going to be a new book on $2 radio by another former student called Radio Iris. She's changed her name from, she got married, it was Anne Marie Jeter. I would really look forward to that book. She was in my classes, so I really know it, and it's great, and so that'll be coming out. Those are 2. Margaret Wappler's another one. So those are 3 right off the bat.
So one of the sad things about literary magazine publishing is you can make something, it looks beautiful, it's awesome, it looks great, and you want to touch it and take it to bed and pet it and things, and it has great writing in it, but then you have to somehow get it out there. And so you have to sell it to newsstands, and you sell it at this punishing 64% discount, you know, and then you have to convince some newsstand distributor to take it for you. Then you want to get it into bookstores, and you have to deal with another distributor. Then you have to deal with a printer who may or may not, you know, give you a break on their printing, or they might, in your case, not print it because there's a gay story in there. So obviously it's great to talk in theory about, you know, what we do, but I want to talk a little bit about practicalities. Like, you guys have good magazines. How are you getting them out there, aside from, you know, dropping them off with your friends and telling everyone you know to buy it off your website?
Well, we were lucky in the beginning where we met with a woman who kind of showed us a bit about distribution, Colleen Dunn Bates, who has Prospect Books is her company. And she took Joe and I to lunch and kind of introduced us to some people. So we had a book distributor from the beginning. And, but truth be told, it was really our assistant. She was a volunteer at the time, and then I was, you know, on staff with us, who really just got out there and made a lot of phone calls to bookstores. Because. And
what did you say it was? You said, okay, we have this nice journal, it's called Snake or Slake or whatever.
And she would just describe what we're trying to do. Joe and I, you know, some people in Los Angeles knew what we were up to because they wanted to know what our next step would be after the weekly. And then some of the writers we had Mark Danielewski and Jonathan did pieces, Michelle Hunovan. You know, so there were some good writers in there. And so we were lucky to get on the LA Times bestseller list with the first issue.
Really?
And the second issue too. Now that's a little deceptive though, because we're excited.
It doesn't take much.
we're excited about that, but we've conquered Southern California in terms of the independent bookstores. But and we just yesterday sent a bunch of issues off to Disticor, which is another newsstand distributor. So we're hoping, and that's going to get it into Barnes & Noble and all the newsstands there. But it's not easy. In a couple of weeks, we're going to Cambridge and New York, and we're going to do some readings there and try to get some interest.
Cambridge, Massachusetts?
Yes. No, I know.
Because I can tell you where to go in Cambridge, England.
Well, maybe we'll go there next.
So you get it out. You get the thing out there. You get some people to order it and get it into shops. But how do you bring people to the journal? Like, how do you do you just
parties?
Parties.
Yeah, lots of parties. Well, you know, there was, before the weekly decided to upgrade its quality by getting rid of me and Laurie, there was some knowledge of, we had a base, we had a constituency of sorts, and so there was a lot of interest. That was a wry joke, by the way. The weekly sucks.
I think that was wry. That was wry laughter.
Right.
Silence.
Okay. Yeah, I get a lot of that. Anyway, there's a lot of interest in what we would do. So we got a lot of press right off the bat, and that was very helpful. And then there's a lot of calling people, calling friends, calling bookstores, walking into places, carrying it in, bringing posters in. You know, But the community here seemed ready for something that was, very Los Angeles focused, and there's incredible, pool of we do photography, we do art, we do journalism, fiction, everything, and there's that pool of talent here is just amazing, and they kind of want to congeal around something, and so there's a lot of that. But we could certainly use your help. So we're in many independent bookstores near you, and I have some in my trunk. So.
And literally part of our job, two days this week, Joe and I took my husband Jonathan's pickup truck down to Gardena, to the warehouse, to get some books so we can get them.
And noodles.
Stickers. Japanese noodles, yes. Some ramen.
So, Brigid, what did you do to launch? How did you get people to know about a public space?
I think at first our situation was somewhat similar in that there was a little bit of press about starting this new magazine. So that was, that was very useful. It would have been, I think, much more difficult without that. And now that we have been publishing for a few years, I know that we've all been sort of dismissive of the web and people reading online. But the truth is that is how we find our readers and how our readers find us. For the most part.
Bruce, what about you guys?
Well, we did the same thing. We had party in New York, party in LA, and because Steve had a national reputation, he was able to get, Steve Erickson, a lot of interviews, but it was still very, very hard. And because both Steve and I did not come from a publishing, but a writing, teaching background, and the third person involved also was Dwayne Moser, we really were lost. So we talked to people, and all we heard about distro is going to be really hard, and it was. We did get a deal with Distacor, but it was still very difficult to get into the big bookstores. And then we have one resource that's just, it's a godsend. We have 8 to 10 interns every year who go to the MFA program, and they are all really web savvy, which has how we've reached out. Steve has come around to it, and like they're sending out tweets, they send out Facebook. I'm not on Facebook. I don't even know how to get on Facebook, but they work it, and that has helped us immensely in terms of the reach out. We now have a blog, all these things that we couldn't have, and that's increased our reach to a lot of people. And we are also now putting a couple of stories online from each issue, which we didn't before. That's the future, and you have to kind of accept it.
So you have to use the web to try to conquer the web.
Yes, that's a great way to put it, yeah. It's a tool for us, and that's the way we look at it.
Yeah, we Twitter.
You tweet?
We tweet.
You tweet?
I don't tweet. Someone
do you tweet,
tweets for
Brigid?
us.
I'm tweeting right now.
I'm tweeting with my feet.
Changing gears again, one of the questions I feel like that always comes up when I talk to MFA students or writing students is whether, as editors, we see a certain type of coalescing of aesthetic around a certain style, around a certain type of storytelling. And you guys might be a little early in your publishing to talk about this, but is there? Do you feel like now that you're out looking for submissions, you're getting submissions in, Brigid, you too? Is there something that you just think, okay, God, another card playing story? No, no more stories about 8-year-olds.
The bar fight.
Bar fight.
Yes.
But
No more.
And taking it in a positive direction, is there some sort of movement at all in American literature, or in literature in general?
I think I could answer that as it's the best way. It's really hard. It's rare to come across really fresh stuff, and when you do, it's really exciting. And a lot of times you come across and it's raw. It's not by a trained writer, and we probably go about 50-50, maybe 40-60 famous writers to relatively unknown or new voices. And frankly, I've been more satisfied with the new voices we found. I think the MFA programs can be problematic with voice, I can see a sort of homogenization of style and voice coming through writing programs, and that's, I'm speaking for myself, but that's a problem for me. We've been in sort of the the meta and the postmodern wave for a long time, and I'm looking forward to getting out of that, you know. And so when a lot of the times it's untrained and raw talent that you know I get turned on by.
I was just going to say, I think we also see this, what we see is a huge amount of really well-written stories, usually from MFA people. And when you get a story that's different, you just know fast. I mean, and it may be, I mean, I've told the people who do our reading, the first thing, never read the cover letter, because I don't care if somebody's been published in the New Yorker or never published. I don't want you biased by their background. And, you know, if the story it needs work and it's not perfect in every single way, but it has something you've never seen before or never read before, that's the story we want. And I don't know we get hundreds. We have a very short submission period, but in that period, it's just like they pile up and pile. Well, now we're taking them online. And it's not usual that you take from that pile, but we do, and when we have found them, it's almost unanimous because the story just jumps at you, and that's really great thing when that happens.
I can offer up a little anecdote to illustrate. We got a submission from a pretty famous actor who fashions himself a literate.
Who would that be?
Yeah, I'm not naming any names. And, you know, you really want it to be good, and you really want to publish it because it would bring a certain amount of attention to, which we could certainly use. But then, you know, you read and it's a, you know, recovering junkie, working at a fast food joint, sucking dick to make some extra money for his date, blah, 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 you know. And it's just, you know, blah, you know, so you're just like, oh, hey, please, you know, what, you know. So those tropes are, you know, run across a lot. There's a lot of
The dick sucking or the
the dick sucking, you know, it's like you know, it's the white male angst, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, you know, I was a junkie. Everyone was a fucking junkie once, you know. I sucked. Yeah, who didn't? You know, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it's that kind of deal.
That's how I got on this panel.
Yeah.
So, Brigid,
Yeah, I don't even have anything to do with any of this stuff. I just wanted to.
Brigid, you come at this from a very interesting angle in that, you know, you mix, a public space mixes American fiction with fiction from around the world. You're just helping to launch a Japanese magazine called Monkey Business in the U.S. So you must see the most interesting sort of miscegenation of familiar and unfamiliar tropes in your submissions. Do you find that there's a great big difference between what's familiar in American writing and writing from outside of the rest of the world, or do you find that there is some overlap between, you know, the familiar story that you get and what's new?
I always feel like I'm not very good at answering sort of big picture questions. We have, since the first issue of the magazine, been interested in looking at literary scenes in other countries. So the first issue we did a portfolio of Japanese writers. We did one more recently, a portfolio of a literary scene in Cairo. And one of the writers we worked with in the Japan portfolio was a translator, Motoyuki Shibata. And he decided after working on this portfolio to start a magazine in Tokyo called Monkey Business. But we talked a lot with him in the first issue about the influence of American fiction on Japanese literature. So it's been interesting to me, I guess, to sort of see that come back through the Japanese writers. I will admit that a lot of the Japanese fiction that we have read because of working with him, I feel like I'm not a natural reader for it. It takes me a little bit of I feel like I need a little bit of context in order to appreciate those stories. So for me, that's been one of the sort of unexpected pleasures of publishing the magazine is reading work that maybe I wouldn't.
It makes you feel slightly uncomfortable, maybe?
I would say more than slightly uncomfortable, yes.
Well, it's a tricky thing as an editor, isn't it? Because if you really are looking for what's new, then what's new is not going to be, it's not going to hit all your familiar, pleasure buttons. There's going to be some misfires. And Bruce, I wonder, does Black Clock have any idea about how their taste might evolve? Because it's very clear what the core of what you publish is is doing, but do you think it could evolve away from that at any point?
I think it's probably more clear to what we're doing to you than to us. In that sense, I think we try and go in all different ways, but the thing is, the critic Leslie Fiedler once said to me about a writer, he finally found his unique voice and vision, but I don't think it's going to help him very much these days. And our idea is when we find unique voices and visions, whatever place you may put it in, that's what's going to get in the magazine. I mean, people think of the magazine in its way because of Steve's reputation as sort of a speculative fiction, experimental writer. That's what we want. We get a huge amount of those submissions. That's not what we publish. I mean, So do you get submissions? I mean, we get this at Granta all the time, because we focus on narrative, and it's not often, not always, but it's often realistic. And there's a certain kind of Granta story that I couldn't describe it to you, but I could point it out across the room, that has to do with something essential and big at stake, and it feels like it's been pulled from the bone, and feels like the writer is born to tell this story. I don't want familiar stories. I don't want proficient stories. I don't want metafictional stories. I don't want clever stories. I want stories that are going to make you put the book down and weep, and that just shut everything down except for itself. And, but there's lots of other kind of stories that I see and I think, God, this is a great story, but it's not for us. And I pass them on. Do you do that ever? Oh, yeah, we do, and we recommend people. But the one thing that I'm always really looking for, which yes, I love stories that make me weep or change me, but what we're really looking for are stories that are funny in a really not TV kind of way, that have a real down-to-the-bone sense of humor that in a flash can also cut you. And that's what I look for most when I'm reading those. I want something that'll make me laugh, and by the time it's over, I'm on the verge of suicide as well. I really like that.
And you're wearing black. No,
It's my backpack.
Funny stories are hard to find, aren't they? I mean, have you guys published anything yet where you think, Jesus fucking Christ, that's funny?
Jerry Stahl will do it for you.
He's really good.
But I was thinking, it's true that we are all looking for, I think, authentic voices. One of the reasons maybe we're all doing this is that when you look at the publishing world and what magazines do overall, more and more of them are so formulaic now, and everything has to have a house style. And we're kind of anti-house style, where I want everything to be different on from story to story. I want a different voice to come through, and we help that happen.
So how does that inform your editing? I mean, because when you must be coming across lots of different styles, and how do you trim off what isn't the voice? Or how do you know if what you're trimming off is the voice? It
takes a lot of time. I mean, and that's that kind of careful editing. There are many kinds of editing, but we will get in there and change a story quite a bit. But it's got to be true to, we work with the writer, and it's got to be true to what they originally said they wanted to do. And sometimes they don't know that, they don't know why that first draft isn't there yet. And then there are also stories that we get that we were just this week we were talking about a story that is a good story. We would have published it in the weekly, but we're not sure yet if it's going to work in Slake yet.
Brigid, I have a question for you. I mean, because Granta does these Best Young Novelist issues every 10 years. There's 3 Best Young British that launched Rushdie and Ishiguro, and 2 Best Young American. We just did a Best Young Spanish edition. Had 21 writers under 35 writing in the Spanish world. So we got these pieces in Spanish and then farmed them out to translators, and then suddenly we had to edit. And I thought, okay, there's a lot of internal monologues, there's a lot of digressions, and at what point in the editing am I trying to make this an American story? And you are editing you had an Icelandic portfolio once. Is that true? Swedish?
Antarctica.
Antarctica, of course.
No language difficulty.
Yeah. So how do you know when you're editing translations? You're at the tip of the Vanguard, to bring back to the panel. doing something damage to the story? Or maybe not representing
Right.
the story as it should be?
I think we've both published, one of the writers you had in the Spanish edition was a writer from Argentina, Samantha Schweblin.
She's great,
Who's
yeah.
a beautiful writer. And Daniel Alarcón introduced us to her work and translated the story for us. So, I mean, we have to go, or we do go sort of,
To her.
through the translator. She, speaks a little bit of English, so we were in some touch with her. But really, it's, for our purposes, I suppose it's the translator's story. So that was something that we had a few missteps, I would say, early on.
Did you do parallel reads? Because here's an example of what happens when you get edited in translation. We had a guy translate a story, and it's set in an Argentinian town, and it's about a face-off between another guy, and it's really macho, and every other word is fuck, And so he just thought, this is weird, I don't know, like, this doesn't seem very good. And so we had our guy on staff read it in Spanish, and he said, he doesn't use the word fuck ever in this story. So we wrote to the translator, like, what's the story with this? And he said, I just thought it was kind of like The Wire. So he just layered the fucks in there, So my question is, do you ever get, when you're working with a translator, you have to take the translator's word to a point, but do you ever think, we should get this read by...
Like how I should.
I can give you some good Spanish.
We're such a small magazine, and we work very closely with the translator, the writers we publish. And I think if I've learned anything, it's we worked early on with a few translators we didn't know that well, and I think that made the working relationship a little more complicated.
So, Laurie, who are your other scouts on the ground? Because all of us, we're editors, but we have these spies. There's probably these people sitting amongst you who are working on our behalf. Who are the people that are like, okay, you got to read this?
Oh, definitely. Well, we have some volunteers here in the office, Laurie and Laura, and actually one of the writers, is Jackie Gorman still here? I can't see. There she is. She had a story in the second issue, and that she's a new writer who came to us. I think was that from Tom Christie? Simone. Yes, yeah. So we have editor friends. Michelle Hunneman will bring us tell us about people. We have a lot of writer friends.
We've been doing this in this town for a long time, so
You have a wide network.
yeah.
Actually, and David Kippen is here too, and when he invited me down to the
Libros
book,
Schneeblos?
well, yes, there's that, definitely. But the book fair in Guadalajara, which was focused on Los Angeles, and I got to meet a lot of. It was interesting to go down to Guadalajara to meet a lot of Los Angeles writers. So that was, and actually that's one of the reasons we actually have a lot of events here. We want our writers to know each other and kind of create a community. Because I would do this at the Weekly too, where people you edit by email or phone, and people never meet them. So.
Yeah, if your social life is lacking, just tune into the Slake Facebook or website. We seem to have an event every other week, so come on out.
Bruce, who are your scouts, so to speak?
Our scouts are Anthony Miller and David Hewlin, who are both like roving editors, so they help us a lot. But our biggest scouts have been the writers who, the Lethams and the famous people who many of whom who do teach, who turn us on to their best students. So a lot have come from other writers or people they've read who say, this is really great, do you know this person? So we get a lot of our new writers from the established writers who are extremely generous in getting this out. And people would just hear about, Anthony reads like zillions of books, and David, of course, when he was editing, he got a lot of stuff, and he would just give us an idea, hey, this person's really good, they're not going to review them or something, but we reach out from that way. So, and also we do get, we get some from our own students who are really great as well, who recommend people. So there's it's not I wish there were a really great process, but it's kind of an amorphous thing, word of mouth, and it happens, and that's.
I mean, don't you find you're just always talking about your work, and when I meet someone and they want to know what I'm doing and tell them about Slake and they just get excited, and then often those conversations lead to tips about great writers and artists.
Yeah, I typically get books about dolphins after those conversations.
That's why you need the volunteers to read through.
Yeah. Well, actually, we when I first arrived at Granta, our backlog on slush. I apologize in advance for any of you who was in this pile. It was a year and a half.
That's
so,
nothing.
really, I looked at that. And I thought. So we got it down. So now our return time is a month.
Wow.
And it's not read by interns. The publisher, myself, and the other editors read it, and we respond. If we like it, it's a handwritten or whatever. If we don't, and if it's okay, then it's form letter. But do you guys read your unsolicited? Who reads them? Is it interns, staff members?
Yeah, we sort of a blind submission thing where, like I think Bruce was saying, we don't know where it's coming from at first, and we have a panel of volunteers that read, and they put comments on it, and eventually we'll read it as well, regardless actually of what. But there's some things that are moved a little bit quicker to the top of the pile. But that's it's we found a few great things from the slush pile, and that's really awesome when that happens. But more the process is more like we were talking about fresh voices. One of our contributors, Joseph Mattson, just popped in. Hey, and this guy's rad, and he's in our this current issue, and he's in our next issue, and he came to us through, I think, James Greer, who's an old friend of mine and a fantastic writer, and Jerry Stahl. And it's sort of more like, hey, you got to know about this guy. And I picked up his novel, Empty the Sun, and read, and I was like, man, this guy is the shit. We got to work with him, And
so does that mean in like some code that he has to pass someone to you?
Yeah, well, he has, and he will. He's, and they tell two friends, and they tell two friends, and that's how it grows. But it's really and I'm sure Bruce and Brigid and Laurie, and you as well. You've obviously been doing a heroic effort I feel personally responsible to try and read every submission that comes in, because I know what it's like to be
on the other end.
On the other end, I know what it's like to if we're not here doing this to try and help writers and encourage them and give them a place to go, then we might as well go away. And so if you're out there submitting, just keep doing it. I know these people up here and Laurie and I, we are interested in it, and we do want to get to it and read it. That doesn't mean it's going to make it, but keep at it.
Yeah, I just want to, because what Joe said is really important. Almost all of us have been on the other end, and that makes us really sensitive to it. In our case, we have at least two people read it. Our interns do read it, but then so does either Anthony, Michael Simmering. She's our managing editor, but she's also a great reader and writer. Keon Kim, so it goes through a long process before we actually send it back. Because I basically, when I was submitting like that, didn't feel like one person should be able to reject my story, even though in most cases they were right. But hey, but it feels better to me when I know that a number of people have felt that way, and Steve is the last arbiter. He gets the ones that we've chosen, and then he makes the final choices. But and that you said you get back in a month.
Yeah,
we're more like 18 months.
Yeah,
you're setting the bar pretty high there. Thanks.
No, it took a lot of
but
work
God bless you
to get to that. But in the process of reading through everything we've bought, I mean, we're almost like you now, where we've almost agreed that every issue should have one brand new writer in it. And we've had good luck with the people we've introduced, like everyone from Arundhati Roy to this guy who's on a new issue in Aliens called Chris Dennis, whose first published story. He just sent it in. He just recently graduated from an MFA program in St. Louis, and it's incredible.
Right.
But we're down to 10 minutes to go, so I thought we should open it up to questions. I realized I didn't tell you to turn off your cell phones.
Could you do that now?
You do that now. There's also a signing following the session. And I should mention, too, that Black Clock's booth is 107.
No. 172, and it's right actually by Town and Country or whatever it's called. Town and Gown, sorry.
Go by their
And we're
booth.
sharing with Book Forum. Also, if you bring your ticket, there's a one-time offer. Bring your ticket, you get a free copy of Black Clock.
Yeah. So
What? You don't get tickets? They took your tickets. Well, tell them I said that. My name's Bruce. They'll give it to you.
yeah.
Gee, Wes, sorry, but this is our way of promo, man. We're old school.
And if you stop by the Granta booth, which is number 59, and you say Bruce, you'll
And if you come to my truck, I'll give you one.
Yeah.
If I can find the parking structure.
We're actually having a party tonight, and if you go by, you don't have to say Bruce. You can just go and they'll give you an invite to the party, which is at 8 o'clock. And it's a reading with T.C. Boyle, Mona Simpson, Jonathan Evanson, and lots of other great people.
Joseph Mattson.
Joseph Mattson. Excellent people. But let's have some questions, because this is your chance to ask one of these editors something like, when are you going to hear back from my submission? And other stories.
Not all at once.
Yes, over there. There's a microphone, I think, on the side. If you.
So, I know, I think all of you publish visual art in your magazines. Maybe not Granta?
Yeah, we do visual art.
You do, okay. I'm interested in how you choose the visual art in terms of how you think about how it lives on the page and in the space of the book. I'm also interested in how you think about sort of its relationship to the literary works that are also included in those issues.
Well, our first issue, which is that one, we created a lot of the art in-house with our designers to accompany the stories. We have a couple of really talented designers, Alex Bacon and Dan Paterka, and they're fairly accomplished artists themselves. And then the second issue, we wanted to kind of pair better known visual artists with the stories. So a lot of the supporting art, like Mary Warnoff, who's a writer and a former factory girl and exploding plastic inevitable dancer and all that. She's also a painter, and we used some of her paintings to illustrate her work. And we used a couple of other really great local artists like Sage Vaughn and Ingrid Allen. She's all right. It's my girlfriend. And Matt James, and photographers to specifically match their work with some of the narrative. And in the upcoming issue, we're doing something completely different. We're going with the same aesthetic, sort of a supremacist Russian propaganda type of aesthetic for the entire issue, which is themed War and Peace. And it's just something we wanted to try, go a little more minimalist. And so it's always fun. That's the part of the creative process, and it's fun to think about those things and match them up that way and come up with ideas. And
We had like Sandow Burke lead off the first issue.
Yeah.
So we wanted like paintings, and there were LA artists and photographers, Craig Stesick, and also our poems. It was important to us that we gave them spreads and had art designed just for the poems as well.
Brigid, what do you guys, do you have an art director?
We work with a designer, and also, we look or find art in much the same way we find fiction and nonfiction, sort of through the grapevine. We've worked a lot with documentary photographers. Zoe Strauss, who's a photographer from Philadelphia and has been working, or has just finished something called the I-95 Project, photographing sort of photographs her neighborhood during the year, and then once a year would have an exhibit under the I-95 overpass where she would sell the photographs for $5. We've worked with some photographers who are affiliated with the with Duke's Center for Documentary Studies there's a writer down there, Sam Stevenson, who has been working on a project about the photographer Eugene Smith. So we've talked with him a lot about photographers, and also Alex Soth published his work.
Well, we've had the good fortune of being at Cal Arts, which has a wonderful art department. So our first art director, Gail Swanland, worked there, and she chooses the art. And the magazine's actually been awarded quite a lot for our visuals. This is one of my favorite covers. And so with each issue, Steve talks to, now we have Chris Morabito as our art director, also another person at Cal Arts, and they read it and then they talk, and I describe the process as Steve trying to tell the art director what he wants, like John Lennon telling George Martin, I want the sound of 1,000 monks and tomorrow never knows, and it comes across. We get the sound, we get the visual sound of the magazine each time, and that's really what we're after. So in that way it changes, that they mesh together, and yet it doesn't overpower the word, because the word always comes first for us, but we want it to be beautiful as well. And this magazine actually, because of the writers and the beauty of it, it's probably my favorite issue. It actually sells for 10 times the price now on eBay. You can't find it, and I think a lot has to do with the way it looks as well as what's in it, and that's what we stress that with every issue as well. No. Matter of fact, I'm holding on to this for.
Hello. First of all, hello, Brigid Hughes. The last time and the first time we met was at the 50th anniversary of George's Memorial and the Paris Review. The question is for the four of you. Oh, one other question. Does a public space have a booth here?
No.
All right.
Just me.
I'm so glad that I caught you. We are subscribers, by the way.
Oh, wonderful.
So, yeah, and I found you on the internet, so there you go. This is a question for all four of you. Several times I've heard the mention of a theme. Now, if a writer is to write to a theme, how are they going to know how far ahead that theme is going to be and what it's going to be? Like, you know, burlesque in downtown Los Angeles in the 1950s. You know, let me know if that's happening. Okay?
Yeah.
Thank you.
We don't get that specific. But thanks for the idea.
I think that could fit with just about any theme.
Yeah, that will fit. Yeah, no, our themes are pretty broad. If you can tell me what crossing over means, which is the theme of our second issue, you can have this. And our first issue, Still Life. I don't know what that means. And our next one, War and Peace. Well, what isn't War and Peace? So don't worry about it.
How does Granta think about that? Because Granta is sort of the magazine that's thought of as creating the themed issue.
Yeah, we've had 115 issues, 114 have been themed. The first issue I worked on was unthemed, and it sold very poorly. Very poorly, and people were like, why? Was there a typo? There's no... So, we have our themes chosen right now until February of 2012. Our theme now is aliens. That's the issue on stands. And we basically have two ways to go about it. We have themes we decide in advance because we think they're interesting. Either it's a theme like sex, which we did last year, or Pakistan. There's a great collision of interesting times and great talent. Or we just keep getting pieces about a certain theme. So we decided to do an issue called Going Back last summer because we kept getting pieces about memory and about people going back to places they used to have a relationship with. And aliens was the same way. And we just kept getting pieces not about space aliens, although we looked hard for those. Really hard. It's actually really hard to get a good space alien story. But we kept getting stories about immigrants and travelers and things, so we just decided to choose that theme, and we'd have to choose them far in advance. Not sure if you guys are this way, but because it has to go in a catalog to go to publishers. So right now we are after aliens. It's the F word, feminism, which is printed and on its way to newsstands end of May, and then after that there's an issue called 10 Years Later about how the world has changed since 9/11, and after that there's an issue called Horror about things we think are repellent and scary, and after that there's an issue called Exit Strategies, about leave takings and things. So, but what about you? I mean, do you make your themes public? Because that's the only, the only time I'm going to say the themes is when I'm at something like this.
We don't really do themed issues. I think in part because the one or two times that I had been part of a theme issue, the work that came in that was the most interesting didn't fit the theme. And when we start putting an issue together, I think we think a little bit about how the pieces fit together and have a secret theme.
Do you have a secret theme?
Yeah. Yeah,
It's called Awesome.
no,
That's the theme.
secret theme is that the issue magically gets put together without me doing any work. No, we don't. But we've done 1/3 of our issues about themes, and we do not publicize them. Those are the issues that we solicit from a very large group of people. Because the one thing we did learn the first time we solicited a smaller amount, and we didn't get that many people said writing original work for us. So we send it out to a bunch of the writers, like we mentioned, who are part of our stable, and then a whole bunch of new writers who've come to us and see if they have something. And that's why we go back and forth, because there are a lot of pieces that come in that don't fit into any theme. So it's just what strikes, mainly what strikes Steve's fancy, that, oh, we're going to do this theme on this. And I mean, I wanted to do the sports from the 4th issue, and it took me to the 12th to get it out. And that one worked really well because it was so many different takes. My favorite piece in that is Why I Hate Sports. And it was, it's a great piece. So no, we just think them up and go. But I don't know how you come up with 112. What'd you say, how many themes?
115. But we've done some twice, like Africa, because the first one didn't have any African writers in it. Yeah, I wasn't there then. I can't. And we've done travel literature twice because it's part of Granta's history. One final question. You're on the right.
I'm currently in an MFA program, and it seems like, I don't know if this is general across the board, the one class that seems to be missing is the world of publishing and how to get published, kind of. From a literary journal perspective, like if I'm more of a novelist, do I need to dedicate time to writing short stories so I could submit to journals to try to get published there first? And then do you guys pass, like the writers that you do like, that are new and fresh, on to agents in the big publishing houses, or how does that work?
Yeah, the question is, do we pass people on to agents and publishers?
Yes,
Yes.
we do, yeah.
I think you'll find that agents often read a number of literary magazines, and they will often contact a magazine if they see that a new writer has been published, and we sort of help to connect them.
There was another part to your question, though. I didn't.
Well, like being more of a novelist, like you guys publish short stories, right?
Yeah, and we publish excerpts when, yeah.
Well, like, do I need to dedicate time to focusing on short stories and try to publish in the literature?
The practical answer to that question is that a publisher does not want to publish a collection of stories. They want you to have a novel. So you would probably be smarter. I mean, if you are a novelist, you should not worry about the short story. Many magazines excerpt novels.
Do you?
We have on occasion, yes. If they sort of stand alone and work as stories.
I think the question's fair. I mean, because it's sort of, if you're a young writer, it helps to have it published elsewhere before you become, when you're sending a manuscript to an agent, if you can
It's
say.
one of those horrible catch-22s. You can't get published till you get published. Well, how do you get published? We'll get published, and then we'll publish you. Yeah, it's a bunch of bullshit.
But I mean, the excerpt, we've done a number of excerpts from unpublished novels that we get at least, I'd say, minimum 4 to maximum, so far 10 agents have contacted us after an issue about stories, and they don't always get picked up, but they do read it, and they are looking for novels, but there are at least 2, maybe 4 novels that were excerpted in Black Clock that have gone on to be published. The one that I mentioned before, Grace Kralonovich's, was excerpted, and something that Steve and I worked really hard on getting an excerpt and shaping it so it stood alone, and then it got picked up. So if you are a novelist, I think don't work on a short story. Do what you do, and it'll come out. And just to answer the first part of your question, since I don't know if anyone else teaches an MFA program, most programs don't have that how to get published thing because there isn't a course in it except, I'll just say this because I just was talking to my class about it last week. I think if you're really good and you don't give up, you will get published. Despite all the crap about the publishing world, good writers find venues, and there are more and more venues that aren't the normal way to go. So just keep at it.
Yeah, don't write for a market, write for yourself.
I think it's a really great note to end on. I want to thank my panelists, Bruce Bauman, Laurie Ochoa. Ochoa?
Ochoa.
Ochoa. I'll get it when I get back to New York. Bruce Hughes, Brigid
Just keep
Hughes,
saying Bruce and you get free issues.
and Joe Donnelly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John Freeman.